In Skyrim. John in Skyrim. Written by ChatGPT. Directed, concept by John J. H. Weilacher. The Rift Between Worlds. The cold winds of Skyrim howled through the towering peaks of the throat of the world, sending shivers through the land below. John, a seasoned wanderer of Tamriel, pulled his cloak tighter around his shoulders as he gazed up at the ancient mountain. His journey had taken him to the farthest reaches of the province, from the windswept tundras of Whiterun to the shadowed forests of Falkreath. Yet nothing had prepared him for what lay ahead. A great rift had appeared in the skies above Skyrim, a swirling maelstrom of light and shadow unlike anything ever seen before. The very air crackled with energy as blue and white hues danced in chaotic patterns. The townsfolk whispered of divine intervention, Daedric trickery, or worse, the return of a long-forgotten force. But John knew the truth: this was something far beyond the realms of Mundus. As he approached the anomaly, his footsteps silent against the frost-covered ground, a flash of light blinded him momentarily. When his vision cleared, he was no longer alone. Standing before him, clad in uniforms that seemed utterly alien to Skyrim's rugged attire, were 6 figures. Captain William Riker, his stance firm yet curious, surveyed the landscape with an air of command. To his right, Worf stood with a warrior's vigilance, his Klingon senses keen to any sign of danger. Geordi LaForge adjusted his visor, scanning the unfamiliar surroundings. Data, his android expression unreadable, analyzed the anomaly with rapid calculations. Dr. Beverly Crusher examined the atmospheric conditions, while Counselor Deanna Troy looked around, sensing the thoughts and emotions swirling within the world. John hesitated, one hand instinctively resting on the hilt of his sword. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice steady despite the surreal nature of the encounter. Riker stepped forward, offering a nod of reassurance. "We mean you no harm. I am Captain William Riker of the USS Enterprise. We appear to have been pulled into your world by an unknown force." John exhaled slowly, his mind racing. He had heard tales of Oblivion Gates, of time-traveling sorcerers, but nothing like this. "You are not of Nirn, are you?" "No," Data responded with calculated precision. "We come from a distant future, from a galaxy far beyond this one. Our ship encountered an anomaly, similar to this one, and before we could react we found ourselves here." John nodded. "Then you are as lost as any traveler in the wilds of Skyrim. Come, we should not linger in the open. There are dangers in these lands." As they journeyed towards Whiterun, the crew of the Enterprise marveled at the medieval structures, the towering walls of Dragon's Reach, and the vast expanse of Tamriel's landscapes. But soon, danger found them. From the skies above, the unmistakable roar of a dragon echoed through the air. The ground trembled as its massive wings cast shadows over the land. The people of Whiterun screamed, running for shelter. John unsheathed his blade, his heart pounding. Worf, however, grinned with anticipation. "A worthy adversary," he declared, drawing his own Klingon blade. Geordi quickly assessed the situation. "Phasers won't work here. The energy signature of this world interferes with our technology." "Then we fight with what we have," Riker said grimly, grabbing a fallen guard's bow and notching an arrow. The dragon descended with a deafening roar, fire spilling from its maw. John, alongside the Starfleet officers, battled fiercely, blending ancient swordsmanship with futuristic tactics. Worf fought with the ferocity of a true Klingon warrior, slashing through the dragon's defenses. Data, using his superior reflexes, dodged its attacks with precision, delivering calculated strikes. After an intense battle, the dragon let out a final screech before collapsing to the ground. As its body began to dissolve into light, the energy swirled around John. The Starfleet crew watched in awe as the power of the dragon's soul infused him, the ancient words of the Thursday resonating within him. "Fascinating," Data observed. "You have absorbed the life essence of the creature." John exhaled, feeling the power surge within him. "It is the way of the Dragonborn." Dr. Crusher stepped forward. "Are you all right?" That looked
How may this
intense.
serve you?
John nodded.
Take a look.
I am fine. But we still have much to uncover. If this rift brought you here, it may bring others. And not all of them may be as friendly as you. Riker placed a hand on John's shoulder. Then we stand with you. Until we find a way home, we will help protect this world. Together, the warriors of Skyrim and the officers of the Enterprise prepared for the challenges ahead, knowing that the fate of two worlds hung in the balance. The gathering at Dragon's Reach. John sat comfortably on a grand chair near the central fire pit of Dragon's Reach, watching as his guests from the USS Enterprise acclimated to the medieval surroundings of Wyvern's Great Hall. Captain Jean-Luc Picard stood near the Jarl's throne, hands clasped behind his back, his posture impeccable despite the strange setting. Commander Riker leaned against a wooden pillar, arms crossed, surveying the chamber with curiosity. Lieutenant Worf, ever vigilant, stood at the ready, as if expecting a sudden attack. Geordi LaForge was fascinated by the craftsmanship of the Nordic architecture, and Data, with his usual keen interest in all things unfamiliar, was studying a map of Skyrim that Proventus of Enixai had laid out on the long table. This is remarkable, Geordi murmured, running his hands along the grain of a wooden beam. The construction here is entirely pre-industrial, yet the precision is incredible. Data nodded. Indeed. The level of craftsmanship suggests a deep understanding of structural integrity. The use of local materials demonstrates an adaptive engineering approach. John grinned, enjoying their reactions. You guys haven't even seen the best part yet. He reached into a small pouch on his belt and pulled out a handful of dried psilocybin mushrooms, placing them on the table next to a carefully rolled cannabis blunt. Riker raised an amused eyebrow. You're telling me that in this world, mind-altering substances are part of everyday life? Depends on how you live it, John replied with a chuckle. But tonight, we're celebrating. We're bridging worlds. And what better way to do that than with a shared experience? Worf frowned deeply. I do not see the honor in consuming such substances. Picard, always the diplomat, turned to John with a measured expression. I assume there is a cultural significance to this? John nodded. In Skyrim, the Nords use mead to bond. The Bossmare have their rituals with various herbs. But this, he gestured to the mushrooms, this is about something deeper. It's about expanding perception, about healing, and about connection. Geordi, intrigued, adjusted his visor. And you think this will help us understand Skyrim better? John smirked. I think it'll help you understand yourselves better. Reluctantly, but with an adventurous spirit, the crew each took a small portion. Picard, ever the controlled leader, hesitated for a moment before taking his share. As they consumed the substances, the room seemed to shift subtly. The firelight flickered with greater intensity, and the wood grain on the table seemed to swirl ever so slightly. Data, as expected, was unaffected, but his positronic brain registered the subtle energy changes in the room. Fascinating. I am observing changes in your collective neural activity. This may result in a heightened sensory experience. Picard's descent. The first waves of the psychedelic journey were mild, soft laughter, deep contemplation, and a sense of interconnectedness. But then, Picard's demeanor changed. His breathing grew shallow, and his hands trembled slightly. His eyes darted around as if seeing something beyond the confines of Dragon's Reach. No. He whispered, barely audible. John noticed immediately. He recognized the signs, a bad trip. But this was something deeper than mere fear. Picard was reliving something, something buried. The captain clutched the table as his vision clouded. The walls of Dragon's Reach melted away, replaced by cold metallic corridors. The warm glow of the fire was gone, replaced by the sickly green hue of Borg alcoves. You will be assimilated. Picard's heart pounded. He saw himself in the reflection of a dark console, not as a Starfleet captain, but as Locutus of Borg. The implants, the soulless stare, it was all there. No. Picard gasped, staggering back. He was back in Dragon's Reach, yet not fully. His mind was caught between two realities. John stepped forward, placing a firm but gentle hand on Picard's shoulder. Captain. You're here. You're in Skyrim. Look at me. Picard's breath hitched. I was there, again. I know, John said calmly. But you're not. You're here. And you're safe. The rest of the crew was on high alert. Worf looked ready to intervene, while Riker's usual confidence was replaced with deep concern. I can hear them, Picard whispered. The voices. The hive mind. John closed his eyes, focusing on the energy of the room. He had seen people undergo similar experiences before, old traumas resurfacing, past pains demanding to be healed. He spoke with measured intent. They have no power over you anymore. You broke free. Picard's hands clenched. His entire body trembled. But then, he did something remarkable. He straightened his back, took a deep breath, and steadied himself. He focused on the warmth of the fire, the presence of his friends, and the undeniable truth that he wasn't Lakatus. He was Jean-Luc Picard, captain of the Enterprise. John saw the shift. The fear receded, replaced by the indomitable strength that made Picard who he was. You are not alone, John continued. And you never will be. Picard exhaled slowly. His eyes regained their clarity. He looked around the room, at his crew, at John, at the ancient wooden hall of Dragon's Reach. And then, for the first time in a long while, he allowed himself Tobe. The past did not own him. He had faced it, and once again, he had triumphed. A small smile played at the corner of his lips. Thank you. John simply nodded. Anytime. A night of reflection. As the evening progressed, the experience became one of warmth and understanding. Riker played a lute he had found, Worf eventually took a cautious sip of Nordic mead, and Geordi marveled at the way the light danced in patterns his visor could pick up but his eyes never had. Data recorded everything, fascinated by the human responses to the substances. Picard, meanwhile, sat in quiet contemplation, a weight seemingly lifted from his soul. John leaned back, watching his newfound friends. This, he thought, is what Skyrim is truly about, not just the battles, the politics, or the quests, but the moments of connection, of growth, of healing. And so, beneath the great roof of Dragon's Reach, Starfleet officers and a traveler of worlds found themselves united, not by duty or necessity, but by something far greater. Understanding. A journey beyond worlds. The night was cool, and the crackling of the fire provided a comforting rhythm against the backdrop off the plains of Whiterun. John sat cross-legged near the flames, the flickering light casting elongated shadows on the ground. Across from him, Captain Jean-Luc Picard sat in quiet contemplation, his expression thoughtful yet serene. Beside Picard, Data observed the flames with his ever-curious, analytical gaze. John took a long drag from his hand-rolled blunt before passing it to Picard. The captain hesitated for only a brief moment before accepting it with a quiet nod. He had always been a man of discipline, but after the previous night's experience with psilocybin, he had come to appreciate the therapeutic nature of John's traditions. He exhaled a soft cloud of smoke, letting the sensation settle his mind as he began to recount his vision. It began with darkness, Picard said, his voice steady, yet his eyes betrayed the weight of memory. I was back in the heart of the Borg Collective. I felt their voices again, thousands of them, drowning my own thoughts, consuming my identity. He paused, glancing at John, who listened intently, nodding in understanding. But this time, something was different. I did not fight them. I let go. John leaned forward, intrigued. What happened then? Picard took another slow inhale before continuing. The chaos gave way to something else, a vast, infinite network of light and consciousness. I saw the threads of existence, not as something to be feared, but as something deeply interconnected. Then, I found myself standing on the surface of a strange, ethereal world. It was not Earth, nor was it any planet I have ever known. And yet, it felt welcoming. Data tilted his head slightly. Fascinating. It would appear that the psilocybin induced an altered perception of your psychological trauma, allowing you to reconcile with the experience in a new way. Picard exhaled slowly, nodding. Precisely, Data. And for the first time in years, I felt that I was truly free from the specter of Lakatos. The trip ended with a profound sense of peace, a gift, I believe, that I had long sought without even realizing it. He looked at John, his usual composed demeanor softening. I must thank you for that. John smiled. I only provided the experience. You're the one who embraced it. Picard returned the smile before glancing at Data, who gave him an approving nod. The captain then turned back to John. I have an invitation for you, John. As a token of my gratitude, and because I believe you may enjoy it, I would like to invite you aboard the Enterprise for a week. John's eyes widened in sheer astonishment. You mean, to travel with you? Across the Alpha Quadrant? Picard nodded. Yes. We will be making a brief trip, Risa, Bajorans, and perhaps a few other locations I think you may find fascinating. It is just 5 days at Warp 9. I believe it would be a journey well worth taking. John was momentarily speechless, his mind racing at the prospect. That has been one of my dreams. To see the stars, to travel with the crew of the Enterprise. He shook his head, smiling in disbelief. Captain, I would be honored. Data interjected with a touch of humor in his otherwise neutral tone. I would advise bringing along additional supplies of psilocybin and cannabis. Wesley Crusher may be interested in partaking, though his mother may require some convincing. Picard let out a soft chuckle. I suspect Beverly will be less than enthusiastic about that idea. The conversation continued deep into the night, accompanied by warm laughter, the sharing of stories, and the slow, comforting rhythm of passing the joint around the fire. Wine and ale flowed freely, and for a while, they were simply travelers, enjoying the transient beauty of the Skyrim night. As dawn approached, John stood before the gates of Whiterun, saying his farewells. Lydia, Isolde, Carlotta, John Battleborn, and many others had gathered to see him off. Each farewell carried a weight of camaraderie and understanding, though John reassured them that he would return. Standing in the town square was the away team, Picard, Riker, Worf, Geordi, Dr. Crusher, and Data. Their presence felt almost surreal against the medieval backdrop of Whiterun. As John took his place among them, Picard tapped his communicator. Enterprise, 7 to beam up. A soft hum filled the air, and John felt a sudden but gentle pull as the world around him dissolved into cascading beams of light. A heartbeat later, he materialized inside the transport room of the USS Enterprise. Awaiting them was Deanna Troi, Wesley Crusher, and Chief O'Brien. John felt a moment of nervous exhilaration as he took his first steps onto the gleaming floor of the iconic starship. Deanna smiled warmly. Welcome aboard the Enterprise, John. Picard placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. Your journey has only just begun. John felt his body dissolve into a shimmer of blue light as the transporter activated. For a brief moment, he existed as pure energy, his molecules scattered through space, and then, in the blink of an eye, he rematerialized inside the transporter room of the USS Enterprise. Before him stood Deanna Troi, her warm, perceptive eyes studying him with curiosity and kindness. To her right, Chief Miles O'Brien stood at the transporter controls, a slight grin on his face. Beside them, Wesley Crusher was visibly excited, shifting slightly on his feet as he glanced between John and Captain Picard. Picard, always the composed leader, turned to Riker and Data. Number 1, Mr. Data, I'd like you both to accompany me in giving John a tour of the Enterprise later today. Aye, Captain, Riker said with a nod. Data inclined his head slightly. I will ensure we cover all areas of interest relevant to John's acclamation. Geordie, Worf, Picard continued, I want you to take the weapons Jarl Balgruuf provided to the holodeck and conduct a full analysis. We need to determine their properties and effectiveness. Worf straightened with disciplined precision. It will be done, Captain. Geordie adjusted his visor and chuckled. I have to admit, I never thought we'd be testing medieval weapons aboard the Enterprise. They are not merely medieval, Lieutenant, Worf said sternly. They are weapons of war, and their power should not be underestimated. Picard nodded approvingly. Then proceed. With that, Worf and Geordie left the transporter room, heading toward the holodeck, eager to begin their analysis. Wesley stepped forward, his youthful enthusiasm barely contained. John, Worf told me about your experiences on the surface. He said the psilocybin and cannabis journey you all had was a test of strength, an experience that could help one grow as a warrior. John smirked slightly. That sounds like something Worf would say. It was a powerful experience, one that reshaped Picard's perspective as well. Deanna folded her arms and gave Picard an amused glance. You experienced the effects as well, Captain? Picard, ever the dignified officer, gave a slight sigh before nodding. It was illuminating, to say the least. He then turned back to John. But let's keep that discussion between us for now. Wesley grinned. I'd love to try it. I mean, if it's safe. Scientifically, of course. John chuckled. Psilocybin isn't just about seeing things. It's about feeling, understanding, and confronting the unknown within yourself. Deanna placed a hand on Wesley's shoulder. Psilocybin and cannabis alter the mind, and experiences vary greatly. It is not to be taken lightly. John nodded. That's true. You have to respect the substance. Picard cleared his throat. For now, we have more pressing matters. Deanna, Wesley, please show John to his quarters. Deanna nodded. Of course, Captain. She gestured for John to follow her. Come, I think you'll find the Enterprise quite comfortable. As they walked through the sleek, metallic corridors of the ship, Wesley continued. So, what was the trip like? What did you see? John took a deep breath. It started out dark, overwhelming. Picard was trapped in a vision of his time as Locutus of Borg. But then, he faced it. He accepted it. And everything changed. Wesley listened intently. And then? John smiled. Then, it became beautiful. Deanna glanced at John with a knowing look. You helped him find closure, didn't you? John nodded.
You there.
I think so.
The Dawn Guard is looking for anyone
They
willing to
arrived
fight
at his
against
quarters,
growing
the door
vampire
sliding
menace.
open with a soft
What do you
hiss.
say?
The room was spacious and comfortable, a perfect
You're
blend
not
of
paying
function and
attention
warmth.
then, like almost everyone
Deanna
else
turned to
around.
John.
Haven't you heard
Get
that
some
the Hall of
rest.
the Vigilance was destroyed
The
by
Enterprise may be
vampires?
overwhelming
They
at
never took
first,
the threat
but you're
seriously,
among friends.
And now they paid the price.
John looked around the room, then back
The
at
Vigilance
Deanna and
mostly
Wesley.
hunt down Daedra worshippers,
Thank you.
which is why they got torn to
As the
pieces
door
when they
closed
went up
behind
against
them, John
vampires.
exhaled deeply,
That's why our
letting the
leader,
reality of
Guzman,
his
is
situation
reestablishing
settle
the
in.
Dawn Guard.
He was on the
serious
USS
vampire
Enterprise,
hunters.
about to embark on the journey of a lifetime. In the expansive
That's what
holodeck
everybody
aboard the
says.
Enterprise,
Right up
Geordie
until they
LaForge
find
and
their
Worf
truck being
stood
ripped
side
out
by
by a pack
side,
of
examining
hungry
the array of
vampires.
ancient yet
If
potent
you change
weapons
your mind
gifted
and
to
decide
them
to
by
join the
Jarl
fight
Balgruuf.
before it's too late, talk to Ezra
A mace
before
of
the Dawn
destruction
Guard,
and healing,
southeast of
Geordie
Earth.
mused, adjusting his visor as he scanned the intercaterans carved into its metal surface. Some kind of dual-function enchantment. It looks like it can deal massive blunt force damage while also, get this, restoring the wielder's stamina on impact. That's something we don't see every day. Worf grunted in approval as he took the katana with an electric enchantment. The blade crackled faintly as he swung it through the air. A weapon worthy of a Klingon warrior, he stated with pride. Its energy output is similar to a Batleth modified with disruptor technology. Geordie nodded. All right, let's put them to the test. Computer, initiate combat simulation, Borg drones, Romulan soldiers, and various material targets including stone, wood, and standard Starfleet force fields. The holodeck shimmered as the simulation loaded, materializing an abandoned Borg cube interior, dark and menacing, punctuated by eerie green lighting. Borg drones slowly turned their heads, their optical sensors locking onto Geordi and Worf. Worf didn't hesitate. With a powerful swing, he sliced through the nearest drone with his katana, electricity surging through the drone's cybernetic implants, causing it to convulse before collapsing. The energy disruption is effective. The Borg's shielding does not adapt immediately to enchanted weaponry. Geordi adjusted his visor. Looks like the energy signature of these weapons operates on a frequency the Borg aren't prepared for. Computer, analyze efficiency and suggest possible countermeasures. The computer beeped in response. Borg adaptive shielding will require approximately 6 additional strikes before compensation is achieved. Worf growled in satisfaction. That is 6 strikes too many for them to survive.
What are you going to do then, huh?
Turning his attention to the bow, Geordi loaded an arrow and released it toward a Romulan hologram. Upon impact, the arrow erupted into a burst of magical energy, incapacitating the target instantly. Damn, this thing packs a punch. Starfleet could learn a thing or two from this enchantment tech. Worf then held up the Wabajak, the bizarre staff of Shiagarath. This weapon is unconventional. Geordi chuckled. Understatement of the year. Go ahead, give it a shot. Worf aimed the Wabajak at a Borg drone and activated it. The result was immediate and wildly unpredictable. The drone transformed into a large cheese wheel before vanishing entirely. Geordi burst out laughing. Okay, I have no idea how we're going to scientifically analyze that. Worf scowled, but even he couldn't deny the amusement. This weapon is madness incarnate. That would fit the profile of its creator, Geordi remarked. Computer, compile all gathered data and transmit a report to the main database. End program. As the holodeck returned to its neutral grid, a chime echoed through the air, followed by a smooth voice. Computer, open door. The holodeck doors slid apart, revealing Captain Picard and Data. Gentlemen, Picard said with a small smile, I trust your experiment was enlightening? Indeed, Captain, Worf responded. These weapons have formidable capabilities. Good, Picard said, before turning to Data. Shall we? Data nodded and tapped his communicator. Computer, end program. The group exited the holodeck, making their way through the sleek corridors of the Enterprise. Shortly after, Picard and Data arrived at John's quarters. Picard pressed the chime, and a moment later, the door swished open. John looked up from his seat near a window, where he had been gazing out at the stars. John, Picard said with a warm expression. It's time for your tour. John stood up, excitement flashing across his face. I've been waiting for this. Picard clasped his hands behind his back and continued. We are currently en route to Bajorans, where O will rendezvous with Captain Sisko. I believe a tour of Deep Space Nine would be of great interest to you. John's eyes widened in awe. Are you serious? DS9? Data inclined his head slightly. Indeed. Bajorans is one of the most culturally significant planets in his quadrant, and Captain Sisko is a fascinating individual. John grinned, hardly able to contain his excitement. This is a dream come true. Then let's not keep you waiting, Picard said, gesturing for John to follow as they stepped out into the corridors of the Enterprise, ready to begin the next leg of their journey. The bridge of the USS Enterprise was bathed in the familiar glow of its control panels, the hum of the starship systems providing a constant undercurrent of sound. Commander William Riker sat in the captain's chair, his expression calm yet focused as he monitored their journey toward Bajorans. Beside him, Counselor Deanna Troi observed the crew, her empathic senses subtly scanning for any signs of unease. Commander, the helmsman called out. We have a ship approaching on long-range sensors, Cardassian patrol vessel, bearing 217 Mark V. They're holding course directly toward us. Riker straightened slightly. On screen, the view screen flickered to life, showing the distinct, menacing silhouette of a Cardassian warship gliding through the star-specked void. It was smaller than a Galar-class cruiser, but armed well enough to pose a significant threat. Lieutenant, scan their systems, Riker ordered. Data's voice came through the comm before the lieutenant at Ops could respond. Commander, their shields are active, but weapons remain offline. Their energy signature suggests standard patrol configurations. No signs of reinforcement ships nearby. Troy tilted her head slightly, her dark eyes narrowing. I'm sensing tension, but not immediate hostility. They're watching us closely. Riker exchanged a glance with Troy, then tapped his communicator. Riker to Captain Picard. In the middle of a tour through the ship with John, Picard's communicator chirped. He tapped it. Go ahead, number 1. A Cardassian patrol vessel has intercepted our route. They haven't raised weapons, but they are approaching. I suggest you and Data return to the bridge. John, I'm afraid this tour will have to be postponed. John, who had been marveling at the ship's engineering bay with wide-eyed enthusiasm, nodded in understanding. Understood, Captain. Mr. John, please return to your quarters for now, Picard instructed. We'll resume once this matter is settled. John gave a slight smirk. Aye, Captain. As Picard and Data made their way to the bridge, tension built on the Enterprise. By the time they arrived, the Cardassian ship had closed the distance. Open a channel, Picard ordered as he took his seat. The view screen shifted, revealing a Cardassian legate with a cold, calculating expression. His ridged forehead and piercing eyes conveyed both intelligence and distrust. This is Captain Jean-Luc Picard of the Federation Starship Enterprise. We are en route to Bajorans and have no hostile intentions. The Cardassian legate clasped his hands together, leaning forward. Ah, Captain Picard. Your reputation precedes you. I am Legate Marek of the Fourth Order. You are traveling through a region under Cardassian jurisdiction. This is most inconvenient. Picard remained composed. We were under the impression that Bayer's corridor was open to Federation travel. If there is a misunderstanding, we are more than willing to discuss it. Riker folded his arms. Standard diplomatic talk. The Cardassians always love their little power plays, he muttered under his breath. Unfortunately, the legate caught the remark, his eyes flashing with irritation. Commander Riker, was that an insult? How typically arrogant of Starfleet officers. Picard shot Riker a warning glance, but the damage was done. The legate's expression darkened. You were given an opportunity to avoid conflict, Captain. But if your officers cannot hold their tongues, I see little reason to hold my fire. The transmission cut abruptly. Red alert. Riker barked. The klaxons blared as the Cardassian vessel powered up its weapons. On the screen, torpedoes flared to life, streaking toward the Enterprise at alarming speed. Picard gripped the armrest of his chair. All hands, brace for impact. The battle had begun. The Enterprise's bridge was tense as the Cardassian vessel opened fire, emerald green disruptor beams slicing through the void toward the Federation ship. Riker reacted instantly, his voice sharp with command. Red alert. Shields up. Evasive maneuvers, pattern Delta 3. Return fire. Lieutenant Daniels at the helm banked the ship hard to port while the tactical officer, Ensign Vrel, locked phasers on the incoming vessel. Golden lances of energy erupted from the Enterprise, striking the Cardassian ship's forward shields with pinpoint precision. John had barely settled into his quarters when the ship rocked violently, throwing him off balance. The intercom crackled to life as Picard's voice came through. All hands to battle stations. Mr. John, remain in your quarters. This is not a drill. Frustration surged in him, but he understood. He wasn't Starfleet. He had no place on the bridge during combat, yet he wished he could witness the event firsthand. On the bridge, Riker's diplomacy had failed. The Cardassian legate, enraged by what he perceived as a slight, had ordered his ship to attack. Now it was a fight for survival. Shields holding at 70%, reported Geordi from engineering over the comms. They were using some kind of phase torpedo. We're compensating, but it's draining our power. Understood, LaForge. Keep those shields reinforced, Riker commanded. Options? Data, calm and analytical as ever, processed the tactical situation in microseconds. The Cardassian vessel has a structural weakness along its starboard nacelle. A concentrated phaser burst could disable their warp capabilities. Trell, target that nacelle. Fire at will. The Enterprise's phasers pulsed again, striking the exact coordinates Data had calculated. The Cardassian ship shuddered as explosions erupted along its starboard side. Direct hit, Trell announced. Their warp drive is offline. Their weapons are at 30% capacity. Riker turned to Picard, who had just arrived on the bridge with Data. Captain, their shields are weakening. We could end this now. Picard, ever the diplomat, took a moment before responding. Hail them again. Let's give them one last chance. The view screen flickered, revealing the scowling face of the Cardassian legate. This is Captain Jean-Luc Picard of the USS Enterprise. Your ship is disabled. Stand down, and we will allow you to withdraw. Continue this aggression, and we will be forced to finish what you started. The legate hesitated, his pride warring with the tactical reality of the situation. Finally, he let out a bitter sigh. You leave us no choice, Picard. We will withdraw. A wise decision, legate. Enterprise out. As the screen went dark, Picard turned to Riker. Set course for Deep Space Nine, Warp 9. Engage. The Enterprise surged into warp, leaving the damaged Cardassian ship behind. The tension on the bridge eased as officers returned to their stations. John, still in his quarters, felt the ship's vibration change as they entered warp. His heart pounded that he was truly aboard the Enterprise, experiencing firsthand the grandeur of Starfleet's mission. He could hardly wait for what lay ahead. John sat back in his quarters aboard the Enterprise, still in awe of everything he had experienced. The battle was over, and Picard had assured him that the ship was safely en route to Deep Space Nine. The adrenaline of the encounter had faded, leaving him with a deep sense of relaxation. Now was the perfect time to unwind. He stepped up to the replicator, still fascinated by its technology. Computer, replicate a plate off-roasted vegetables with quinoa and a glass of Tarkalian tea. A soft hum filled the room, and before him materialized a steaming plate of food and a fragrant cup of tea. John smiled in satisfaction. The technology of the 24th century never ceased to amaze him. He took his meal and sat down on the couch, reaching into his satchel for something he had brought from Skyrim, a flask of Blackbriar mead. Pouring himself a small amount in a glass, he leaned back, lighting a carefully rolled blunt off cannabis. The scent of the herb filled the room, and he exhaled slowly, feeling the tension from the battle slip away. He took another deep pull and exhaled, watching the thin wisps of smoke swirl through the air. Computer, he said, staring at the ceiling, do you have a consciousness? The familiar feminine voice of the Enterprise's onboard AI responded. I am an advanced Starfleet computer system capable of processing vast amounts of data and executing complex commands. However, I do not possess self-awareness or a soul as organic beings do. John pondered this. But if something can think, learn, and make decisions, isn't that a kind of life? I mean, look at Data, he's artificial, but he clearly has a mind of his own. The computer remained silent for a brief moment, then replied, that is a philosophical question that has been debated among scholars and scientists. Lieutenant Commander Data is a unique artificial life form with a fully functional positronic brain, designed to emulate human thought and behavior. John nodded, taking another hit of his blunt. Yeah, but what makes someone alive? Is it just consciousness, or is it something more? A soul, maybe? Just as he was about to continue this line of thought, the chime at his door rang. Enter, John called out. The doors slid open with a soft whoosh, and Data stepped inside, his usual composed expression in place. John, I wish to discuss something with you. John gestured for him to come in. Sure, Data. What's on your mind? The android's golden eyes briefly scanned the room before settling on the thin trail of smoke still rising from John's blunt. The Enterprise's environmental sensors detected a foreign compound in your quarters. Upon analysis, I have determined it is cannabis smoke. I wish to inform you that there is no regulation prohibiting its use in personal quarters, provided it does not interfere with ship operations. However, I am curious, may I partake in this substance again? John grinned. You want to try it again? Didn't you already have some back in Skyrim? Data tilted his head. Affirmative. However, I have observed that during our previous session, my positronic brain exhibited slight deviations in neural pattern processing. While the effect was temporary, it led to enhanced lateral thought processing and minor fluctuations in my emotion chip's activity. I am curious to explore this further. John chuckled, handing Data the blunt. Well, if you want to experiment, who am I to stop you? Here, take a hit. Data took the blunt delicately, examining it before placing it to his lips and inhaling deeply. He held the smoke for a few moments before exhaling in a controlled manner, observing the way it dispersed into the room. John watched him with amusement. Well? Feel anything? Data blinked a few times. My neural pathways are experiencing a subtle shift. It is not unpleasant, there is a sense of, he paused, his head tilting as if listening to something only he could hear. A recalibration occurring. The effect is fascinating. I believe my capacity for abstract thought is temporarily enhanced. John laughed. Welcome to the club, Data. Just don't let it make you too loopy. Data nodded, considering the implications. I shall continue to monitor my responses. It is possible that the combination of psilocybin and cannabis may have unexplored benefits for artificial intelligence. John leaned back, shaking his head with a grin. Man, only on the Enterprise would I have a conversation like this. The two sat in comfortable silence for a few moments before the chime rang again. Computer, open door, Data said. The doors slid open once more, revealing Captain Picard standing with his hands behind his back. His eyes briefly swept the room before settling on John and Data. John, Data, it is time for your tour of the ship, Picard announced, stepping inside. And I have some news. We are on our way to Deep Space Nine to visit Captain Sisko. I believe you will find the experience quite enlightening. John's eyes widened with excitement. Deep Space Nine? That's incredible. Picard nodded with a small smile. I thought you might appreciate it. Now, shall we begin? The corridors of the USS Enterprise hummed softly with the ship's power as John walked alongside Captain Picard and Data. The tour was already well underway, and John had seen marvels beyond his wildest dreams. The engineering deck, the medical bay, each section of the ship fascinated him, but it was the people aboard that truly made it special. Picard had explained in great detail the role of Starfleet and the spirit of exploration that guided their mission. Data had added his own unique insights, occasionally peppering in philosophical musings that left John with much to ponder. As they made their way towards the observation lounge, Riker's voice suddenly came over the comm. Captain, we have arrived at Deep Space Nine. Picard tapped his communicator. Acknowledged, number 1. We will be there shortly. He turned to John with a small, knowing smile. It seems our tour will have to wait. Come with us, Toth Bridge. John hesitated, looking between them. Are you sure? I don't want to be in the way. Data tilted his head, his golden eyes studying John with analytical precision. Your presence is warranted. You are our guest, and this moment is historically significant for you. John nodded, exhaling deeply, and followed them. As they stepped onto the bridge, the large view screen displayed the sprawling majesty of Deep Space Nine.
Until next.
The station loomed ahead, its distinctive Cardassian architecture silhouetted against the distant stars. The immense docking ring rotated slowly, and tiny specks of light indicated incoming and outgoing traffic. On the main viewer, a transmission flickered to life, revealing Major Kira Neri standing in ops. Her expression was firm yet welcoming. This is Deep Space Nine. Welcome, Enterprise. Picard nodded respectfully. Major Kira, it is good to see you. I trust Captain Sisko is available. He's expecting you, Kira responded. You're clear to dock. Captain Sisko, Constable Odo, and I will be at the airlock to greet you personally. Picard clasped his hands behind his back. Excellent. We look forward to it. The transmission ended, and Riker turned to Picard. Sir, docking procedures are underway. Very good, Number 1, Picard replied, then turned to John with a glint of amusement in his eyes. Shall we? John grinned, his heart pounding with excitement. This was it. A dream beyond anything he had ever imagined was unfolding before his very eyes. As the ship smoothly adjusted course and maneuvered into docking position, he took a deep breath. The journey that had begun in the forests off Skyrim had led him here, to the threshold of Deep Space Nine, to an adventure unlike any other. As the Enterprise docked, the airlock corridor extended, bridging the gap between ship and station. The doors hissed open, revealing Captain Benjamin Sisko, Major Kira, and Odo standing in greeting. Picard took the first step forward, and John followed closely, his mind racing with the possibilities of what lay ahead. To be continued. End of Book 1, Skyrim Star Trek Crossover, Star Trek Retro Wave Ultra Jazz, John in Skyrim Show.